can you describe, like for the person out there who doesn't know much about astrology, is there something you haven't described yet that would be like something that would really help them to understand kind of the structure of astrology?
Well, I wrote a book called The Stars Within You, A Modern Guide to Astrology. And it was basically the introduction to astrology I always wished existed when I was studying astrology, that never existed. And I introduce it, the introduction, I think, gives a really good layout. I go into the history of it. I go into the basic components of what it is and how it's useful. And then I break down, the different ingredients of how to read a chart. And, the signs, the planets, aspects, and the houses are the basic ingredients.
And so it's based on the day you were born and the location you were born, right?
Yeah, the day, the time, and the location.
Okay. So then, I know you're not here to convince anyone of anything. Any response to the observation then? So I was born 3 a.m. at a certain hospital here in Southern California. Wouldn't, the dozen or so babies that were also born immediately right after or close there be surprisingly, strikingly similar to me?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's funny. I just talked to a client this morning who's a twin, and I know her twin sister as well. And it's funny because she's like, we are so different. Like, she's Icelandic, they're Icelandic. And she's like, we are so different. Like, how I really want to know, like, I do tutoring with her. And the next time we meet, we're going to talk about how the differences show up in the chart. And the thing that's so funny is she's like telling me they're so different, but they're actually so similar,
Yeah.
But anyway, those potentials can show up in different ways, and free will is a big part of that. Of course, genetics can be part of that because twins can have different genes if they're not identical. And different people born at the same time have different genes, different upbringings. And so the coloring of those potentials can be different, right? I always say too, like if two twins have rebelliousness in their charts, like let's say two twins have Aquarius moons or strong Uranus in their charts, part of how they develop and identify themselves is going to be in rebellion to one another. So it's like, okay, as you develop, this person's going to work really hard at distinguishing themselves from the other twin. Right. And so that's going to shape who they become, for example. But, if you look at anyone's chart, like my chart, I'm a Virgo rising, Aquarius moon. I actually have a lot of friends who are also Virgo suns, Aquarius moons. Now we're all different. We all do different things. But they are we're weirdly similar too. Like I'm an astrologer now, right? So I'm very detailed and precise, which is Virgo. And then I'm kind of cosmic. I call us the cosmic nerds, right? So I'm always thinking about the bigger picture and humanity and, and then going into the minutia and then finding the collective overarching theme, and then if you think about the illustrator of my book is a Virgo Aquarius. He does really precise drawings, like very talented, but he draws sort of cosmic material or alien-like material. So similar energies. Or Kimball Musk, is a Virgo Aquarius, right? And so he's working on creating these gardens for different communities to like help with like food deserts and things like that. And so he's very organized and precise and into Virgo and health related things, but he's thinking about humanity and progress, and how do we progress humanity, and how can I contribute to these various communities in meaningful ways, right? How can I be of service, Virgo?
Right. And so it's not enough to say someone's Virgo, right? Because I guess there is a potential for a lot of variability because that's, 28 days or whatever. It depends on the specific day that you were born and the time and the location.
And the location.
Seems complicated.
It is. It's a very complicated. It's like no joke. I always say it's like you have to know geometry. You have to know stars. You have to know archetypes. You have to know storytelling. You have to be able to have this kind of improvisational skill of like weaving together the different archetypes and the different and understand symbology, and then layer everything together in a cohesive way. I mean, I think of myself as like a cosmic storyteller.
How the hell did you get good at this? How much of it is just frickin' just intuitive? You've got the gift or the ability to.
Yeah. I mean, I weirdly have the gift. It just feels like it calls on everything I'm good at. Like as soon as I started reading charts, I was good at it. And I didn't grow up that way. I told you I grew up in conservative Texas with like capitalistic parents and whatever. And,
Those damn capitalists.
Yeah. I mean, sort of, I believe that. And I was like, not that way. But then as soon as I saw an astrology chart, it wasn't in my vocabulary to think this, but I was like, this is an energy map. And I intuitively understood the shapes and the lines and the angles I was seeing, and it intuitively matched the person I knew. I was like, this makes sense. And then as I started reading the chart, it just came really naturally to me. I didn't believe in past lives at the time, but I was like, oh, I've done this in past lives. It was just that kind of intuitive hit of like, I already know how to do this. And so I was pretty good at it right off the bat, but then I just kept going. And I am obsessive with whatever I'm interested in. Like I feel like anything I would have been interested in, I would have gone all the way with, because I'm just like that. And I became obsessed with astrology pretty quickly.
So you mentioned free will, and I think a lot of people out there that are sort of like astrology, because I want to have free will, and astrology suggests everything is determined. So if you could talk on. Right, exactly. So if you could speak to that, yeah.
Yeah, no, it definitely doesn't. And like 99.9% of modern day astrologers agree. I mean, if anyone doesn't agree that we have free will and they're an astrologer, I'd say they're a hack, or they've like misunderstood something. But that is something that we emphasize as professional astrologers, free will. And what it is a karmic guide, a karmic map of our potentials. What we do with those potentials is entirely up to us. A good example of that is like Charles Manson's chart. The Manson family, who was the cult leader who orchestrated the murder of Sharon Tate, etc. And he has Pluto, I believe, on his IC. And Pluto is trauma, death and rebirth, abuse, and the IC is the family and the mother line. And so and it's obsession. So there was this deep trauma with his mother and the death of his mother. I think believed his mother died when he was quite young, and he ended up going from foster family to foster family. And he was obsessed with the notion of family, the Manson family, and Pluto is the shadow. Pluto is the underworld. It's our unprocessed material that needs processing so that we can be reborn. We can rise like the phoenix from the destruction of our traumas, right? And he had this incredible charisma in his chart, this incredible creativity and charisma and this obsession with family. He could have done something amazing with that, right? He could have gone into deep therapy and healed his deep mother wound and healed the wound of not having a family. And he could have created this creative family and this community in a way that was constructive rather than destructive. Right? But because he didn't choose that potential, he kind of went into the neurotic potential or fell into the neurotic potential. He was still clearly charismatic, wildly creative, and obsessed with family, but he went into the neurosis of that potential.
Interesting. And so we have potentials, and yet we also have free will that can shape how that potential manifests.
Exactly. Like when someone has a lot of 12th house planets, I'm like, okay, you can either be a serial killer or the Dalai Lama, because often when we have a lot of unconscious material to work with in this lifetime, we either become conscious of it through the act of meditation, right? And then become these like really realized people, or we fall prey to acting out incredibly unconsciously.